Hi, Dr. Michelle here, of Secrets of Life and Death and Second Chance Secrets. And the topic today is leadership of the heart, or heart leadership. We're going through some really rough times right now. This morning I woke up and I was feeling really grim because I am very psychic and I'm like a sponge and I feel all that energy of despair going on right now. But I believe that this is the dark of the seed before it breaks into the light. I truly believe that. And I also believe that this is the pressure to get us to step into our own power. That as individuals, as community, as grassroots organizations, we need to stop looking for somebody else to save us. We need to step into our own power. And the interesting thing is that this choice to step into power, into leadership, is what we need to do on the personal level as well as on the communal level. And I believe that when we do that in our own lives, in our own homes, in our own relationships, it makes us powerful and it reverberates out. And the cool thing is, you don't have to do anything that you don't truly want to do, that you are not designed to do. You want to do something that is out of your comfort zone, that may scare you. And I will be explaining in a few minutes why it might do that. But let's first talk about what leadership of the heart or heart leadership is not. Number one, it's not command. This is the kind of leadership that you see in large corporations or in totalitarian regimes where punishment is doled out if you do not cooperate. So compliance is based upon the threat of punishment. This is not true leadership. Leadership, and by the way, this kind of leadership would help in corporations as well. Leadership that comes from inspiration, from getting people excited about your plan, is a much better solution because then you don't have to constantly be threatening people. And unless you actually threaten them with death, and then once you kill them, you have no control over them anymore. So it's really not a very effective way. Although we see right now that certain political groups are using threat to get compliance. It's not working that well though, is it? Certainly not in the United States. We are a country of rugged individualists and we do not take threats very well. The second kind of leadership is what I call manipulation. This is when the leader uses fear or shame or blame to get compliance. This is when the leader incites that fear to get people to cooperate. And fear is a very powerful emotion and can get people to buy in because their fear has been activated. And when fear is activated, we operate from the lower brainstem. It's very instinctive, it's very reactive, it's not very bright. Many political leaders use this approach because it's cheap in the sense of verbal rhetoric. The problem is that it is not controllable and you do not know how people are going to respond. And so we have seen a major conflagration. Now, political leaders might utilize that, whatever happens, as something to manipulate to their end. But that is not leadership of the heart. And I believe that when we step into our own leadership, not only do we help our own families and our own communities, but we help the world. So what is leadership of the heart? One more thing it isn't. It's not being a hero. And those of you who are coaches and healers and change makers, you may have fallen into that habit of heroship. I know, I've played that game many times. It is very seductive, and I am going to explain why that is. Hero is when you do all the work yourself, when you take on the whole burden and you try to create it. You cannot create this alone, neither in your family, nor in the community, nor in the world at large. You need buy-in from other people. Now, being committed is not the same thing as being a hero. Being a role model is not being the same as being a hero. But at some point, you need to delegate. I was talking to a client recently. She's got a lot of burden on her shoulders. She's taking care of a son, she's working 2 jobs, she's taking care of a mother, she's paying for the support of somebody else, and she's overwhelmed. And the first thing I asked her is there any way you can get help? She's waiting for something to change. The reality is nothing's going to change until you change. You need to change. The world is not going to change for you. The world is waiting for you to change. So why don't we change? Well, it's very interesting. I see 2 patterns. Childhood patterns that feed into all those other patterns. The controller and the pleaser. The controller becomes the CEO or the totalitarian dictator who feels that they need to control everything in order to feel safe. They don't trust who they are, so they have to use external resources in order to manipulate people. It's a manipulation, and it only works as long as people are afraid. As soon as they stop being afraid, as soon as they have nothing else to lose, you lose your control. The pleaser manipulates in a different way. They manipulate by getting people to feel sorry for them, or getting people to want to support them, to take care of them, or to please them, and so they're going to reward you back. My experience, having been a pleaser for many years and played hero, is that the payoff is never as big as what you expect, and so you end up feeling resentful. Don't do it. And that goes in your home as well as in the community. Don't take it all on. That means learning to say no. But if you have a pattern of controlling or pleasing, it's really hard to change those patterns. That's the work I do. I help coaches, healers, change makers to change the underlying pattern and understand this pattern was formed from childhood, when you were young and vulnerable and feeling unsafe or unloved. And you developed certain patterns to ensure that you got the attention or safety you needed. And it went on for a long time. In my own case, it went on for almost 50 years. I was a pleaser for almost 50 years. And it didn't work. And I kept on making myself smaller and smaller and smaller, and it doesn't work. I worked with another client recently, and she was feeling very frustrated. Sometimes I work with people around caregiving, and she's dealing with a spouse who has difficulty right now, has a threatening illness. Hi, thank you for joining. And she was trying to be the hero. She was trying to take it all on. And guess what? She started feeling resentful, and she started being mean. That's because she was doing too much. And I worked with her to help her set up her boundaries, to set limits, to create a space for herself. And by the way, I'm going to be giving a presentation tomorrow at University of California, Berkeley, to a group of people about caregiving and the essential keys to keeping your sanity while helping people that you need to take care of. So you need to take care of yourself, but you need to believe that you're worthwhile. And here's the problem with those patterns. They're so seductive. They are so ingrained that you don't sometimes even realize that you are in them. And they feel so good when you go according to the pattern. They feel safe, and you actually have, over time, connected them with chemical response in your brain, dopamine release. So, for example, when I go and I rescue somebody, when I play hero, not only does the person express a great deal of gratitude, but I get a dopamine hit. And so that addiction is there, and it keeps us doing the same thing over and over again. If you're a controller and you don't control, then fear comes up. And the fear is so uncomfortable that you feel like you need to do something, that you need to get control of things again. That's why we have leaders who use fear and blame and shame to control people. But I want you to notice one thing that's really important: the difference between leadership of the heart and the other kinds of leadership. And that is that you are going out and trying to get the other people out there to do what you think you need. That's very different from going out, feeling strong in yourself, and telling people what you have to offer and what they need to do to step up. They need to step up. And you need to be, the term I use is authentic. That is, you have to be yourself. Yourself that you were taught as a little child was not okay, was not lovable, was not worthy, was not safe, was not good enough. And so you developed patterns and you hid who you were. One of my patterns in speaking was to come out as a brainiac, somebody who was super intelligent. And so intelligent that people didn't even want to question me because I was so smart and quick, and I came up with these ideas, and people wouldn't even know how or where or how to start questioning me. And so they would be impressed, but then they would go away because they didn't feel me. And that's what you need to do to be an authentic leader. You need to share who you are, to be naked, separate from all the shields and blocks. And that's scary. That's scary for a number of reasons. One, it's scary because we are social beings, wired to bond. And so to be rejected triggers very rudimentary survival responses in us. However, we're human beings. We are smarter than that. We are not just animals. We can change our habits. We can change the way in which we react in the world. We do not have to be dependent upon the others if we know in our heart what we truly believe in. So what's really important is to know what your values are. What's really important is to know who you are, which I'm telling you will take you a while to identify that, because you've probably been spending a good portion of your life giving yourself away to other people, playing for the rewards, playing for the likes, playing for the approval that you don't even know. And you think that you're no good because you aren't getting the approval. You post on Facebook and nobody responds, and you think that you're worthless. Well, that's not true. What you're not is being real, being yourself. And it's okay, I understand, because you haven't had the practice. And it takes practice, and it takes facing your fears to step into who you really are and be honest and vulnerable, to risk being rejected, to talk to your children, to talk to your husband, to talk to your community from your heart. And yes, you may even cry. Yes, you may even break down. And that's okay, because that actually is what sells your proposal. So let me sort of summarize where I've gone with this today. Leadership of the heart is about being yourself. We all need to learn how to be ourselves. That's what we're here for. That is the reason we are in this three-dimensional plane, is to get back to who we are. And also part of our purpose is to help other people to step up to who they are. And when you are leading from the heart in your home, you're affecting your children and you're affecting your husband or your partner or your spouse. You are influencing them. One of my clients uses the term confluential, which is a combination of command and influence. I like that term. Although I'm kind of a spiritual kind of gal, so I like the idea of leadership from the heart, is learning how to tap into your core, to your values, to who you really are, to do that exploration, which is what I do with my clients, is help them to explore, to provide the container and the guidance and the tools to uncover who you really are and what you are meant to be sharing in the world in that powerful way. So if you want to know more about that, please go check out my website, secondchancesecrets.com. You have an opportunity to, there's a free training called 5-Day Makeover Challenge, in which you can identify what it is that you need to change in your life, what's blocking you, and what your vision is that's going to move you forward. So we might start at the very beginning. What do you want to see in your life? What could be better? What could make your life better right now? And that's the inspiration. That's what is going to get you through the fears. Because I guarantee you, there will be fears when you start stepping into who you are. There will be pushback from your husband, from your children, from your friends, when you stand in your power. But the more you practice, the more you change. And the more you change, the more you are influential and make a difference. So it's not command. It's not the ability to punish. So when you use command with your children, that is not leadership of the heart. Now, at some point, maybe when they're very young, you need to use a certain amount of command. But oh my gosh, it reminds me of my niece who was working with her, was playing with her daughter, who I think is barely 2 years old. No, she's not even 2 years old yet. And she was about to pour the orange juice all over the table. And at first, my niece got reactive. She saw a disaster happening. But then she realized that her daughter, who's almost 2, was exploring her universe. And she created a space in which her daughter was able to pour things into a tray where the orange juice or whatever liquid she had would not go all over the place. Would that be wonderful for your mother to have done that with you? Well, in some ways, my mother did that, but in some ways she didn't. In some ways, she allowed experimentation, especially with creativity, because my mother was an artist, and I think that's why my niece is able to do that, because she hung out with my mom, her grandma. But I have a friend whose mother punished her, not once, but twice, for the same infraction, and has had a huge impact on this poor person, this poor, wonderful, creative individual, because of that one incident. That's how fragile we are when we're little children. And it takes work to change that. Okay, so it isn't command. It is not manipulation. And haven't we seen moms who do that? My mother used to do that. She used to make us feel guilty so that we would come home for various birthday parties. This is all I'm asking for. I've given you so much. Or she would play us off against each other. You're the only one I can count on. I appreciate what she had a terrible childhood, and she learned these manipulative procedures because that was the only thing that worked for her. I understand. But you can change. We can change. We live in a time and place where we have the vocabulary and the intelligence and the knowledge and all those coaches out there that can help us to change. So I invite you to reach out. reach out to me. Go to my website. Have a conversation with me. Stop commanding and punishing. Although, sometimes you have to have what we call consequences, but that's very different. That's very different. And then stop manipulating. Stop pleasing, being the hero and doing all the work for them. Oh my gosh, how many mothers go in there and do all the work for their kids because they want to see them do well, but they do not teach them how to show up for themselves, and they rob them of the ability to get good. And my mother did a little bit of this. She often did my projects for me for school. Not a good idea. Oh, I loved getting the A's, but then I always felt like I wasn't good enough, that something was wrong with me, that my mother had to step in, that I didn't trust my own intuition. You want your children to trust their own intuition. So leadership of the heart is being who you really are, uncovering the person who was tamped down when you were a child, who believed that being yourself would be punished. Then, in full vulnerability of being rejected, you make people offers. You offer things to children. Now, yes, sometimes you do have to say no and be the parent. I'm not saying you don't have to do that, but at a certain point, you need to also, and I used to do this. I worked on the Navajo reservation and in Las Vegas as what they called a house parent. I was working with emotionally disturbed and court-adjudicated teenagers. And the most powerful motivation was my regard. And we worked with kids all the way up to the age of 18. And you can do it. You can do it if you are firm, if you are clear, and if you, well, I'm giving you more information than you want, you couple your feedback, your judgment, your criticisms with 5 positives. That's the minimum, 5 for every negative. In Toastmasters, we do what's called sandwiching. When we give feedback, we sandwich it in between positives on both ends. And when we give feedback, we couch it in terms of stretch goals. Because human beings are negatively wired, and they will listen to the negative over the positive. You check it out with yourself. When you get feedback from people and one person says something negative, is that not what you pay attention to? Okay, so let's see. Don't be a commander. Don't be a manipulator. Don't be a hero. Be an authentic leader. And when you do that in your own home, you improve your relationship with your spouse or your partner. You really improve your relationship with your children because you're no longer asking them for their approval. Oh my gosh, I used to do that. I was teaching school, college, shortly after I got out of graduate school. And I wanted my students to love me. Of course they didn't. Some of them did, the smart ones, but the rest of them, they trashed me, and they knew they had that power. Later on, when I worked in the group home, I really learned that. You do not give that power to your charges because they're human, and they want to have an advantage as well. And they have learned those manipulations. The Native American kids, the Navajo children that I worked with, they were expert at seeing where your weakness is. So how are you going to use this particular training that I've given you today? You're going to apply it to your own life first. And then when you step into leadership roles in your community or your volunteer organizations or even in your work, remember what I'm saying. Remember about inspiring people. And remember about being willing to be vulnerable. And by the way, being vulnerable does not mean sharing all your dirty laundry. It means speaking your truth, becoming aware of what your values are. If you would like to have help with that, reach out and have a conversation with me. That's the work I do. I think that's it for today. Be brilliant.